I know I'm just an old guy spinning tales, but some tales aren't meant to be ignored. Trust me, you'll want to hear this one. So turn down the lights, settle in, and let's dive into today's chilling stories. Before we begin, a fair warning. What you're about to hear is purely for entertainment. These stories and theories, they're nothing more than shadows in the dark. No proof, just whispers carried by the night. Listen closely, but don't say, "I didn't warn you." Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, oppressive kind that fills your ears and makes you hyper-aware of every breath you take. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on a cold, metallic floor. The air smelled faintly of rust and chemicals, and the only light came from a flickering fluorescent bulb above me. I sat up slowly, my head pounding. I couldn't remember where I was, or who I was. A groan broke the silence, and I turned to see someone else stirring nearby. A man, his face pale and his clothes rumpled, rubbed his temple as he struggled to sit up. Where are we?" he muttered, his voice thick with confusion. "I don't know," I replied, my voice trembling. Before I could say more, another voice chimed in from the shadows. "What's going on?" A woman stepped into the dim light, her wide eyes darting around the room. She looked just as lost as we felt. "Does anyone remember anything?" she asked, her voice tinged with panic. I shook my head. "Nothing. Just waking up here." One by one, more people emerged from the darkness, each of them confused, scared, and unable to remember how they'd ended up in this place. There were 6 of us in total. The room was stark and empty, its walls lined with scratched metal panels. A single door, heavy and industrial, stood at one end, and a faint red light blinked ominously above it. "What's behind the door?" one of the men asked, his voice shaky. "I don't think we should find out," the woman said, crossing her arms tightly. But curiosity, or desperation, got the better of us. A tall man with a buzz cut stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "We're not going to find any answers standing here. Let's see what's out there." He pressed the button beside the door, and with a loud hiss, it slid open. The hallway beyond was long and dimly lit, its floor streaked with grime. Faint smudges of what looked like dried blood trailed along the walls, and the air was colder here, sharp and sterile. We moved cautiously, our footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the emptiness. The walls were lined with doors, each one numbered and marked with faded, cryptic symbols. "What is this place?" the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "Some kind of facility?" I guessed, though I had no idea. We stopped in front of one of the doors. Unlike the others, this one was slightly ajar, and the faint glow of a monitor illuminated the space inside. Inside the room, a desk was covered in scattered papers and files. A monitor blinked with static, the occasional distorted image flickering across the screen. One of the men grabbed a file, flipping it open. His face paled as he read aloud, "Subject 7, Cognitive and Behavioral Test. Status, incomplete." "What does that mean?" the woman asked, her voice rising. The man didn't answer. He turned the file toward us, revealing a photo clipped inside. It was of me. I stumbled back, my stomach twisting. "That's not possible," I stammered. I don't remember anything like this." Another file revealed a photo of the tall man with the buzz cut, labeled Subject 3. One by one, we found files for each of us. "This isn't real," the woman whispered, her hands shaking. "It can't be." But before we could process it, the monitor crackled to life, and a distorted voice filled the room. "Subjects detected," it said, cold and robotic. "Progressing to stage 2. The door behind us slammed shut, and a loud clunk echoed through the hallway as the other doors began to unlock. "What's happening?" someone shouted, panic rising. The voice continued, unbothered by our fear. "Survival rate, 35%. Let the trial begin." A deep, guttural growl echoed from the far end of the hallway. We turned as one, our breath catching as a shadow moved in the distance. It was low to the ground, its movements quick and animalistic, but its outline was wrong, jagged, unnatural. The growl turned into a snarl, and the thing began to sprint toward us. "Run!" the tall man shouted, shoving us toward the door at the other end of the hallway. We bolted, the sound of claws scraping against the floor growing louder behind us. I glanced back, just for a second, and caught a glimpse of it. A creature unlike anything I'd ever seen. Its body twisted and malformed, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The door ahead of us slid open just in time, and we tumbled through, slamming it shut behind us. For now, we were safe. The new room was larger, filled with broken equipment and shattered glass. Faint scratches covered the walls, and the air smelled of decay. "What was that?" the woman panted, her back pressed against the wall. "A test," I said grimly, holding up the file with my photo. "We're part of something bigger than we realize." The tall man glared at me. "What kind of test involves monsters like that?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but we need to figure it out. Fast." In the corner of the room, a terminal blinked, a single message displayed across the screen. "Room 2, solve or die." The others looked at me, fear etched into their faces. "What do we do now?" the woman whispered. I took a deep breath, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. "We play the game," I said, "and we survive." The words, "Room 2, solve or die," pulsed on the terminal screen. An ominous reminder that the door behind us wouldn't stay shut forever. "What kind of sick game is this?" the woman whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's not a game," I said, staring at the flickering message. "It's a test." "A test for what?" Chris, the tall man, snapped. I didn't answer because I didn't know. But deep down, I had a feeling we weren't supposed to pass. The door to room 2 slid open with a faint hiss, revealing a sterile, white room lined with strange devices and monitors. In the center stood a large table covered in wires and what looked like surgical instruments. On the far wall, a timer blinked to life. 10 o'clock. "What happens when that hits 0? Megan asked, her voice trembling. "I'm guessing we don't want to find out," I replied. A new message appeared on a screen embedded in the wall. "Connect the circuits to open the door. Failure will result in termination." "Termination?" one of the others muttered. "You've got to be kidding me." The growl we'd heard earlier echoed faintly from the hallway behind us. Whatever that thing was, it hadn't given up. "Let's move," Chris said, stepping toward the table. "We've got 10 minutes. The wires were a tangled mess, each one color-coded, but leading to a jumbled array of terminals and switches. "This isn't just a puzzle," Megan said, examining the setup. "It's an electrical circuit. If we get it wrong, something bad happens," I finished grimly. We worked quickly, connecting wires and flipping switches, but the system was more complex than it seemed. Each connection lit up a small indicator, but the colors didn't match the wires, leaving us guessing at the correct combination. "Red to green," Chris muttered, plugging in another wire. The lights flickered, and a loud buzz sounded. The timer sped up, dropping to 5:00. "What the hell did you do?" Megan shouted, panic rising. "I don't know," Chris snapped. "It's not labeled." A monitor lit up with a new message. "Mistakes accelerate the trial." The growl behind the door grew louder, accompanied by the sound of claws scraping against metal. "We don't have time for this," I said, frantically rearranging the wires. "Then stop guessing," Megan snapped, pointing at the terminal. "Look at the pattern. It's in the symbols on the wires." We followed Megan's instructions, matching the symbols to the correct terminals. The timer ticked down, 2 o'clock, 1:30, 1 o'clock. Finally, the last wire clicked into place, and the door to the next room slid open. "Go!" I shouted, but as we scrambled through, one of the others, Lena, froze, staring back at the table. "What are you doing?" Chris yelled. "There's something moving," Lena whispered, her eyes fixed on the wall. Before any of us could react, the door behind her slammed shut, trapping her inside. "Lena!" Megan screamed, pounding on the glass. The growl turned into a roar, and through the narrow window, we saw it, the creature. It was larger than before, its jagged form pulsing with some kind of dark energy. Lena's scream echoed through the room as the timer hit 00, and the lights went out. When they flickered back on, the room was empty. We stumbled into the next room, shaken and breathless. It was smaller than the last, with walls covered in monitors displaying distorted images of us, waking up, solving the puzzle, and running from the creature. "This is sick," Megan muttered, sinking to the floor. Chris slammed his fist against the nearest wall. "They're watching us. This whole thing is a setup." Another terminal blinked to life, displaying a new message. "The purpose of the trial is to reveal your true nature." "What the hell does that mean?" Megan asked, her voice rising. Before anyone could answer, a voice crackled over hidden speakers. It was distorted and mechanical, but the tone was eerily calm. "The experiment seeks to uncover what lies beneath human survival. Only the worthy will proceed." "Worthy of what?" I demanded. But the voice didn't respond. Instead, another door opened, leading to a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Do we even have a choice?" Chris asked, staring into the black void below. "No," I said, stepping forward. "We keep moving." The staircase seemed to stretch on forever, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. Faint whispers echoed around us, but when we turned to look, there was nothing there. Finally, we emerged into a cavernous chamber, filled with rows of glass pods. Each pod held a figure, their faces obscured by condensation, their bodies hooked up to wires and machines. "What is this place?" Megan whispered, her voice trembling. A plaque on the nearest pod read, "Subject 12, status, stasis." The figure inside looked eerily familiar, but I couldn't place them. As we moved further into the room, we found more pods, each labeled with a number, and then we found one labeled Subject 7. It was me. My face stared back at me from inside the pod, pale and lifeless. "What the hell?" I whispered, stumbling back. The monitors around the room flickered to life, displaying the same message across every screen. Phase 3. Confrontation. The door behind us slammed shut, and the whispers turned into screams. The whispers became deafening, filling the cavernous chamber like a living thing. They weren't random sounds. They were voices, fragmented and overlapping, all saying the same thing. "You don't belong here. Leave." But the door behind us was sealed shut, and the only way forward was deeper into the room of glass pods. My breath quickened as I stared at the pod labeled Subject 7. My own face, pale and lifeless, staring back at me from behind the fogged glass. "How is this possible?" Megan whispered, her eyes darting between the pods. "It's a trick," Chris said, his voice shaking. "It has to be." "Then why is it your face in that one?" Megan shot back, pointing to another pod labeled Subject 3. The monitors flickered again, displaying a new message. Phase 3. Confrontation. The truth lies within. "What truth?" I muttered, stepping closer to the monitors. "What do you want from us?" The distorted voice from earlier crackled over the speakers. The experiment was never about survival. It was about discovery. "Discovery of what?" Chris shouted, slamming his fist against one of the glass pods. The voice ignored him, continuing in its eerie monotone. "Subjects must confront the truth to proceed. Begin." Suddenly the pod labeled Subject 7, my pod, hissed and clicked open. The glass door swung outward, releasing a rush of cold air. I stumbled back, but Megan grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "You have to look," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't want to, but I knew there was no choice. Inside the pod, my reflection stared back at me. Not the me I saw in the mirror every day, but a hollow, lifeless version. Its eyes snapped open, and for a moment I felt like I was looking directly into my own soul. The figure spoke, its voice a perfect echo of mine. "You are not who you think you are." I staggered back, my chest tightening. "What does that mean?" The figure tilted its head, its movements unnervingly mechanical. "You've forgotten. That's the point. You all agreed to this. You wanted this." "That's not true," I shouted, my voice cracking. But even as I said it, fragments of memories flickered through my mind. An underground lab, a contract, and a promise to be part of something revolutionary. Chris stared at his own pod, frozen in place. "We're, test subjects," he said, his voice hollow. "This isn't just an experiment. This is us." Megan stepped forward, her face pale. "If that's true, then why don't we remember anything? Why would we agree to this?" The monitors flickered again, displaying a series of images, surgeries, injections, and endless rows of pods, each one holding someone like us. The voice returned. Memories were erased to ensure the purity of the trial. To reveal who you truly are, your past was stripped away. "But why?" I demanded. "To determine if humanity is capable of survival without the burden of its past. To see if you would rise or fall." Before we could process the revelation, a loud crash echoed through the chamber. The growl we'd heard earlier returned, deeper and more menacing. Chris spun toward the sound. "It's here!" The creature emerged from the shadows, its form even more grotesque than before. Its jagged limbs moved with terrifying speed, and its glowing eyes locked onto us. "Run!" Megan screamed. We bolted, weaving between the rows of pods as the creature pursued us. Its claws raked against the floor, sparks flying as it closed the distance. We reached the far end of the chamber, where another terminal blinked to life. The message on the screen read, "One must stay behind to proceed. Choose." "No," Megan whispered, shaking her head. "This can't be real. This can't be happening." The creature growled, its massive form blocking the path back. "We don't have time for this," Chris said, his voice trembling. "Someone has to do it." "No one's staying," I shouted, slamming my fist against the terminal. "There has to be another way." But the monitors flickered with a new message. Sacrifice ensures survival. Refusal ensures death. The creature lunged, its claws slashing inches from Chris's head. He grabbed a nearby metal rod, swinging it wildly to keep the monster at bay. "Go," he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "I'll hold it off." "No!" Megan screamed, tears streaming down her face. Chris shoved us toward the door, his expression resolute. "You want to survive, don't you? Then go!" The creature snarled, its attention fully on Chris now. Reluctantly, Megan and I ran through the door as it slid open, leaving Chris behind. The last thing I heard was his scream as the creature pounced. The new room was small and dark, with only a single monitor glowing faintly. A message appeared. "Congratulations. Phase 3 complete. The final trial awaits." Megan collapsed to the floor, sobbing. "How many more?" she whispered. I didn't answer, my mind racing with the weight of everything we'd learned. We weren't just part of the experiment. We were the experiment. The door behind us slammed shut, leaving Megan and me alone in the cold, dark room. The glow of the monitor cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the faint hum of machinery filled the silence. Megan sat on the floor, trembling. "Chris is gone," she whispered, her voice hollow. "We're all going to die here, aren't we?" I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but I couldn't bring myself to lie. The monitor blinked to life, displaying a new message. Phase 4, the final trial, revealed the truth to escape. "What truth?" I muttered, stepping closer to the screen. "What else is there to know?" A panel slid open in the far wall, revealing a narrow hallway bathed in red light. At the end of the hallway was another door, slightly ajar. "We don't have a choice," I said, helping Megan to her feet. She didn't argue. Together, we walked down the hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing unnaturally loud. The room beyond was unlike anything we'd seen before. The walls were lined with monitors, each displaying a fragmented memory. People laughing, crying, arguing. But they weren't just random strangers. They were us. One monitor showed Megan in a lab coat, speaking with a group of people. She looked confident, determined, nothing like the terrified person standing beside me now. "That's me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But I don't remember this. Why don't I remember this?" Another monitor showed Chris, his face twisted in anger, as he argued with someone over a clipboard. Then I saw myself. On the screen, I was sitting at a table, signing a document. The words "Volunteer Agreement" were stamped across the top. "I agreed to this?" I muttered, my stomach twisting. The monitors flickered, and the distorted voice returned. "The experiment began with a choice. You agreed to forget, to become part of something greater." "Why?" Megan shouted, her voice cracking. "Why would we do this?" The voice ignored her, continuing, "The final trial is simple. 2 subjects remain. Only one may proceed." Another door slid open, revealing a large, empty chamber. In the center was a single chair, surrounded by wires and machines. "One subject must submit to stasis. The other will be released. Make your choice." Megan turned to me, her eyes wide with fear. "They're lying," she said. "There's no release. This is just another part of the experiment." "Maybe," I said quietly. "But if we don't do anything, we both die here." The machinery around the chair buzzed to life, and a small screen displayed a countdown, 10:00. Megan backed away, shaking her head. "I'm not doing this. I'm not playing their game anymore." The voice returned, calm and unyielding. "Failure to comply will result in termination." The ground beneath us shook slightly, and the hum of machinery grew louder. "We have to decide," I said, stepping toward the chair. "No," Megan said firmly. "We're going to find another way out. Together." The countdown ticked down. 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Megan frantically searched the walls for another exit, but there was none. The voice repeated its message. One must stay behind. Choose. I stepped forward and sat in the chair. Megan spun around, her eyes wide with shock. What are you doing? Ending this, I said, my voice trembling but resolute. You're right, there's no way out. But if one of us has a chance, it should be you. No! She shouted, grabbing my arm. We can figure this out together. Don't do this. It's the only way, I said softly. You know it is. As the wires attached to my arms, the monitors around the room displayed more memories. This time, they weren't fragments. They were the truth. I saw myself as a scientist, standing beside Megan in the same lab where the experiment had begun. We weren't just participants. We were the creators. We started this, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. We designed the experiment. Megan stared at the screens, her face pale. Why? The voice answered for us. To test the limits of humanity. To see if survival instinct could overcome morality, memory, and fear. You were the first subjects. The countdown hit 00, and the chair hummed with energy. The wires tightened around my arms, and my vision blurred as the stasis process began. Megan screamed, pounding on the machine. Stop it! Let him go! But the process couldn't be stopped. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Megan's face, tears streaming down her cheeks. When I woke up, I was alone. The room was empty, the monitors dark. A single door stood open, leading to a bright, blinding light. I stepped through, unsure if I was alive, dead, or something in between. Meanwhile, Megan stood in the empty chamber, her fists clenched. The monitors flickered back to life, displaying a single message. Trial complete. Begin Phase 5. Her face twisted in horror, as the walls around her shifted, revealing rows of new pods, each one empty. One of them had her name on it. Megan stood frozen in the chamber, staring at the pod with her name on it. The air was heavy, the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Trial complete. Begin Phase 5. The voice's words looped on the monitors, as if mocking her. No, she whispered, shaking her head. It's over. I'm not doing this. But the room didn't care. The lights dimmed, and the machinery around her began to hum. A single monitor blinked to life, displaying a familiar image. Me, sitting in the stasis chair, my face pale and lifeless. Megan's hands curled into fists. What did you do to him? She screamed, her voice cracking. The voice replied, calm and cold. He fulfilled his purpose. The experiment continues. For what? Megan shouted. What's the point of all this? The monitors shifted, displaying scenes of chaos, riots, war, destruction. The voice continued. Humanity is flawed, selfish, destructive. This experiment seeks to refine it, to create survivors who are strong, adaptable, and free from the burdens of memory and morality. Megan stared at the screens, her breathing ragged. You're not testing us. You're torturing us. Survival requires sacrifice, the voice replied. Your companion understood this. Do you? The pod with her name on it hissed open, its interior glowing faintly. No, Megan said, stepping back. You're not putting me in there. But as she backed away, the walls around her began to shift. The pods disappeared, replaced by mirrors. Each one reflected her face, but it wasn't her. The reflections were hollow, distorted. Their eyes filled with the same emptiness she'd seen in the creature. A timer appeared on the largest monitor. 10 o'clock. The voice spoke again. Enter the pod willingly, and the experiment will conclude. Refuse, and you will join the others. Megan turned to the door, but it was sealed shut. Her reflection in the mirrors began to move on its own, stepping closer, their faces twisted into cruel smiles. "Why?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why me?" "Because you designed it. You knew the cost. You made the choice." The timer ticked down. 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Megan stood frozen, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the experiment pressing down on her, the knowledge that every choice she'd made had led her to this moment. Finally, she stepped forward, tears streaming down her face as she climbed into the pod. The glass door hissed shut, and the machinery roared to life. Her final words echoed in the chamber, barely audible over the hum of the machines. "I hope it was worth it." The monitors flickered one last time, displaying a single message. "Experiment complete. Data collected. Resetting trial." The pods around the facility hissed open, revealing new occupants, different faces, different names, but the same fear etched into their expressions. Somewhere deep within the facility, a terminal blinked to life, its screen displaying a familiar message. Phase 1, waking in the dark. The experiment had begun again. Somewhere, far from the facility, a small team of researchers watched the data streams flowing in. Their faces were calm, detached, as if they weren't observing human lives. One of them turned to their superior. "Another successful trial. Do you think we'll find what we're looking for?" The superior smiled faintly, their voice calm and clinical. "Humanity will always adapt. But we'll keep testing until we find perfection." The camera feed from the facility went dark, replaced by the blinking word, "Repeat,"